everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of the Stephen A. Smith Show, coming at you as I love to do over the digital airwaves of YouTube and iHeartRadio at least 3 times a week. Thank you again for supporting the show. Before I go any further, let me remind you that I always pay a debt of gratitude to my audience, my viewers, listeners, etc. over YouTube and iHeartRadio, because I've now eclipsed over 782,000 subscribers on YouTube and obviously over 2.5 million downloads over the last couple of months over iHeartRadio. Can't thank y'all for the love and support enough. Keep it coming, and I'm going to keep on coming. Let me get right to the news of the day, because obviously it's very, very important to point this out. And I was looking forward to talking about some big-time football that was being played in the opening week of the NFL season. Unfortunately, however, the biggest headline of week 1 in the NFL was not from the football field. Tyreek Hill and other Miami Dolphin players were detained by Miami-Dade Police Department officers before Sunday's game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Tyreek Hill said he was pulled over for allegedly speeding while driving to Hard Rock Stadium. He was ultimately placed in handcuffs after a, quote, verbal altercation, end quote, occurred, sources told ESPN's Jeff Darlington. Hill was cited for reckless driving. He was released after several minutes, but the incident was filmed by nearby fans and quickly went viral on social media. Hill said he didn't know why the situation escalated the way it did. At one point during the incident, video showed Hill lying on the ground, handcuffed, with 4 officers surrounding him. Hill had this to say about what could have been. Here's the quote. "What if I wasn't Tyreek Hill? Worst case scenario, you know? It's hard. I don't want to bring race into it, but sometimes it gets kind of iffy when you do. I just wanted to make sure I was doing what my uncle always told me to do whenever you're in a situation like that. Put your hands on the steering wheel and just listen. Everybody has bad apples in every situation, but I want to be able to use this platform to figure out a way to flip this and make it a positive." Calais Campbell, his teammate, was among the Miami Dolphins teammates who approached officers after seeing this unfolding. And Campbell was also briefly detained. He appeared on First Take on ESPN this morning, where I asked him this. When you say that they were being, using excessive force, I'd like you to be specific with our audience exactly what you saw that makes you say that.
They were trying to yank him down to the ground. And so like I saw him, kick him and pull him down, pulling the cuffs, shoulders looked like they're messing up. They kind of got him down. I felt like the one officer was pushing on his head and just was like completely unnecessary. And so, I got out, I had my hands up like this, approaching, and I'm just telling him like, hey, I'm a friend of his. I stood there for about 5 more minutes, and told him I'll stand wherever you want me to stand. Wherever you tell me how far I gotta back up, I'll back up, but I'm not leaving the scene. And I think I responded to him like, you can tow my car. I don't feel like I'm blocking traffic. And he was like, that's it, you're under arrest. Puts me in handcuffs, and Tyreek's there, obviously feeling distressed, and Jonnu Smith was there as well on the other side in front of him, and I was behind him, and he's like telling Jonnu, "Don't leave me, man, don't leave me," and he's talking to me, and it's just like he's in an extreme situation that I don't think he should have been in. It was completely unnecessary, and so we're here for you. We got your back. If they take us to jail, they take us to jail, but we're gonna do this together.
Now, Hill did mention his gratitude for those that were by his side during all of this. Here's what he had to say about that. Quote, "I'm just glad that my teammates were there to support me in my situation because I felt alone. When they showed up, it made me realize that we have a effing good team this year. For them to put their life on the line, it was amazing to see," end quote. Today, Stedman Stahl, the president of the South Florida Police Benevolent Association, had this to say in a statement, quote, "Before the Dolphins game yesterday, an incident occurred where Tyreek Hill was placed in handcuffs before being released. First, to be clear, at no time was he ever under arrest. He was briefly detained for officer safety after driving in a manner in which he was putting himself and others in great danger. Upon being stopped, Mr. Hill was not immediately cooperative with the officers on the scene, who, pursuant to policy and for their immediate safety, placed Mr. Hill in handcuffs. Mr. Hill, still uncooperative, refused to sit on the ground and was therefore redirected to the ground. Once the situation was sorted out, within a few minutes, Mr. Hill was issued 2 traffic citations and was free to leave, end quote. After all of that, before the game, Hill hit the field and balled out, catching 9 passes for the 130 yards, including an 80-yard touchdown, by the way. He celebrated the score by doing a mock handcuff celebration with teammate Jalen Waddle. Tyreek Hill's agent, Drew Rosenhaus, will join me a little bit later on in the show. Let me say this. I'm not one of these people that laments the state of affairs as it pertains to law enforcement officials and black men by articulating the words police brutality. Because I always say brutality on the part of some police officers, because I don't want to castigate and stigmatize an entire collection of police officers across the United States of America. There are black police officers, there are white police officers, there are Hispanic police officers, and the like, most of whom do exactly what they've taken an oath to do, to protect and serve. But there's rogues in every industry, and there's rogues everywhere. And we got to weed the rogues out. And I think that when you hear about an investigation is ongoing, I want to learn about this officer who was engaging in excessive force. Because that's really what the story is here. The story isn't about Tyreek Hill getting pulled over. The story isn't about Tyreek Hill even being in handcuffs. As unfortunate as that was, let's keep in mind that Scottie Scheffler, an elite golfer, one of the top golfers in the world, if not number one in the world, when he was arrested in Kentucky, all right, months ago, in May, if I remember correctly, when that happened, he was placed in handcuffs and booked. So let's understand, this is not a story about the handcuffs. This is not a story about Tyreek Hill being detained. It's how he was detained. That's the story. Why do you need him face down on the ground? Y'all know how hot it was in Florida yesterday? You know how hot that ground must have been? You put his body and his face on the pavement. You feel a need for 3, 4 different officers to surround him while that's happening. Once you put him in cuffs behind his back, you stand him up. And then afterwards, some other officer comes down a minute later or so and forcibly sits him down. Why? Why was that necessary? See, what people are not realizing, what law enforcement needs to realize is that, remember when the protest was going on? Remember how people had lost it? And there were riots throughout the streets of America. There were protests throughout the streets of America. There was some movement about defund the police, which, by the way, I never agreed with defunding the police. But that's beside the point at this particular moment in time. You know what? You remember that when that happened? You know what was irking people's nerves? Stuff like this. It wasn't just folks getting shot and killed who happened to be unarmed. It was abusive behavior on the part of some law enforcement officials. A level of physicality exacted towards people who happened to be black when we weren't seeing that occur with others. The dehumanization of black men in particular is what rakes our last nerves. And we bring that up because it wasn't necessary yesterday. You have him in cuffs. By the time you got him out the car, there's no doubt you knew who he was. Why would you do that? Furthermore, because you had him cuffed behind his back, you as a police officer were no longer in danger. Why did you have to do that? Where was the threat? Isn't it true that it really wasn't a threat at that particular moment and point in time? Which is why the Benevolent Association is leaning on he was uncooperative. Okay, that explains why you put him in cuffs. Why'd you forcibly sit him down? What'd you do that for? Why prior to that, when you had 4 different police officers surrounding him, why did you have him on that hot-ass pavement with his face down? Why? And the fact that you didn't arrest him makes it even worse, because that means it truly, truly was just a traffic violation, as opposed to something more like you tried to make it out to be. That's why you got the officer on desk duty. Because clearly there was excessive behavior going on. These kind of things are the kind of things that lead to folks, particularly black folks, looking at you and saying, damn. And all of a sudden castigating everybody with a broad brush. That's where you hear words like police brutality coming into play instead of hearing brutality on the part of a rogue police officer. Because not only did it happen, but there were other officers who allowed it to happen. And then on top of it all, you got the Benevolent Association trying to give excuses. It's unacceptable. It really is. But that's just my